Stay with me, because by the end of this story, a millionaire who laughed at his pregnant wife's pain would be led out of a hospital in handcuffs while cameras flashed in his face. Beep, beep, beep. The sound tore through St. Vincent Medical Center like an alarm no one could ignore. Nurses froze. Visitors turned. A coffee cup shattered somewhere near the elevator lobby. Claire Donovan lay curled against the polished white floor outside the maternity wing, one trembling hand wrapped protectively around her 8-month pregnant belly, while crimson stained the pale blue fabric of her maternity dress. Her breathing came in shallow bursts. Sharp, uneven, panicked. Above her stood Vanessa Hale in a cream designer coat, her chest rising rapidly as though even she couldn't believe what had just happened. One of her perfectly manicured hands remained half raised in the air. Ethan Blackwell leaned casually against the nurse's station only a few feet away. Expensive charcoal suit perfectly pressed. A faint smile lingering on his face like this entire moment was nothing more than an inconvenience interrupting his afternoon. Here we go again, Ethan muttered with a cold laugh under his breath. Every time she wants attention, there's another scene. Claire looked up at him in disbelief, tears burning in her eyes stronger than the pain twisting through her abdomen. 7 years. 7 years loving this man. 7 years helping him build Blackwell Capital from a tiny downtown investment office into a company worth nearly $400 million. And now he stood there watching her struggle to breathe like she meant less to him than the marble beneath his shoes. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly. Somewhere farther down the corridor, a newborn baby cried. The smell of antiseptic hung thick in the cold air. Claire tried to push herself upright, but another sharp pain shot through her stomach and she gasped quietly, fingers tightening against the floor. "Please," she whispered. "Something's wrong with the baby." Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Her blonde hair gleamed beneath the hospital lights, every strand perfectly in place. "Oh my God, Ethan, she's still doing this," she snapped. "She's acting like I attacked her when all I did was stop her from grabbing me." A young nurse stepped forward nervously. "Ma'am, we need to examine her immediately." Ethan barely glanced at Claire. "Then examine her," he replied flatly. "But don't expect me to fall for another emotional breakdown." The words landed harder than the pain in Claire's body. Just 48 hours earlier, she had still believed there was a chance to save her marriage. Even after discovering Ethan's affair with Vanessa. Even after the late nights, the lies, the sudden cruelty. She had convinced herself the man she married was still somewhere beneath the arrogance and wealth. But as she stared up at him now, something inside her finally cracked. The mask was gone. The man she loved no longer existed. Footsteps echoed rapidly through the hallway as 2 nurses rushed over with a wheelchair. One crouched beside Claire carefully. "Can you tell me where it hurts?" Claire opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, another wave of pain tightened across her stomach hard enough to steal the air from her lungs. The heart monitor attached to the nearby portable machine suddenly beeped faster. Louder. Sharper. "We need OB down here now," the nurse called out urgently. Vanessa folded her arms. "This is ridiculous." Then she leaned slightly closer to Claire, lowering her voice so only she could hear. "You should have signed the papers when we gave you the chance." Claire's eyes widened. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. "Vanessa," he warned quietly, though not because he cared about Claire hearing the truth. He cared because other people were listening now. Visitors had stopped walking. Phones were beginning to rise. Tiny glowing screens pointed directly at them. One man near the elevators whispered, "Isn't that Ethan Blackwell?" Another voice answered, "I think someone's recording this." Ethan straightened immediately, billionaire confidence sliding back over his face like armor. "Everyone calm down," he announced smoothly. "My wife is under a lot of emotional stress." Wife. The word sounded almost cruel now. Claire felt tears slip silently down her cheeks as the elevator doors at the end of the hallway opened with a soft ding. Heavy footsteps followed. Slow, controlled, powerful. A tall silver-haired man stepped into the corridor wearing a dark overcoat over a federal judge's uniform. 2 police officers moved beside him. The entire hallway seemed to fall silent as his sharp blue eyes landed first on the blood on the floor, then on Claire. And suddenly, for the very first time since this nightmare began, Ethan Blackwell stopped smiling. Rain streaked across the courthouse windows the next morning while reporters crowded behind metal barricades outside the federal building in downtown Chicago. Satellite trucks lined the entire block. Camera flashes burst non-stop against the gray November sky. Inside courtroom 12B, the air felt colder than the weather outside. Claire Donovan stepped slowly through the large oak doors wearing a cream maternity coat over a pale blue dress, one hand resting carefully against her stomach, while Olivia Carter walked beside her carrying a thick stack of legal folders. Every conversation in the courtroom stopped the second Claire appeared. Even the reporters seated near the back lowered their phones for a moment. She looked exhausted, fragile, but there was something else in her expression now too. Something steady. Something Ethan Blackwell had not seen in years. Resolve. Across the room, Ethan sat beside his attorneys in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people made in 2 months. But for the first time since building Blackwell Capital, he looked nervous. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. His jaw flexed constantly. Every few seconds he glanced toward the courtroom entrance like he expected another disaster to walk through it. Vanessa Hale sat 3 seats away from him, wearing oversized sunglasses despite being indoors. The distance between them was impossible to ignore. Less than 24 hours earlier, they arrived together at St. Vincent Medical Center acting like an untouchable power couple. Now they would not even look at each other. The low murmur inside the courtroom disappeared completely when Judge Raymond Donovan entered from the side chamber. His black robe moved sharply behind him as he approached the bench. Calm, controlled, commanding. Ethan stiffened immediately. He still could not fully process the fact that Claire Donovan was the daughter of one of the most respected federal judges in Illinois. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced firmly. The sound echoed against the marble walls. Claire lowered herself carefully into her chair while the baby shifted beneath her coat. Beep, beep. The portable monitor clipped discreetly beneath the fabric still tracked the baby's heartbeat. Olivia insisted she wear it after the complications at the hospital. Ethan noticed the faint sound too. For one strange second his eyes drifted toward Claire's stomach. Something flickered across his face. Guilt maybe. Fear maybe. But it vanished quickly beneath the same cold arrogance he always used to survive. Your Honor, Ethan's lead attorney began smoothly. My client maintains that this situation has been grossly exaggerated by social media and sensationalized by the press. A few reporters immediately started typing. Judge Donovan remained expressionless. A pregnant woman was hospitalized, he replied calmly. There is nothing sensational about that. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Olivia Carter rose next. Your Honor, we would like to submit additional evidence recovered overnight from Blackwell Capital internal servers. The courtroom screens flickered on. Claire looked down quietly as emails appeared one after another. Private transfers, hidden payments, confidential legal drafts. Then another file opened. Vanessa's face visibly drained of color. It was a scanned document, a non-disclosure agreement prepared just 3 days earlier. Olivia's voice sharpened slightly. This agreement offered Mrs. Donovan financial compensation in exchange for surrendering future inheritance rights connected to her unborn child. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Ethan's attorney immediately stood. Objection. Denied. Judge Donovan answered instantly. Claire slowly lifted her eyes toward Ethan. He refused to meet her gaze. Olivia clicked another file. This time a recorded voicemail echoed through the courtroom speakers. Ethan's voice filled the room clearly. Pressure her if you have to. I just need those papers signed before the baby is born. Silence crashed down afterwards so heavily that even the reporters stopped typing. Vanessa turned slowly toward Ethan with pure disbelief written across her face. You told them it was my idea? She whispered harshly. Ethan leaned toward her without looking directly at her. Lower your voice. But panic was already spreading through her expression. Vanessa suddenly understood the same thing Claire had realized in the hospital. Ethan Blackwell protected only one person in this world. Himself. Judge Donovan folded his hands together carefully. Miss Hale, he said calmly, would you like to revise your previous statement to federal investigators? Vanessa stared ahead for several long seconds while camera shutters clicked softly behind her. Then her shoulders dropped. He planned everything, she said quietly. Ethan's head snapped toward her instantly. Vanessa. Her voice grew louder now, trembling with fear and anger. He told me Claire would lose access to the company once the inheritance rights were gone. He said the divorce would destroy her financially if she refused. Ethan stood abruptly. That is not what happened. You told me she was weak. Vanessa fired back emotionally. You told me nobody would care. Reporters practically lunged forward in their seats. Olivia watched silently while Ethan's attorneys scrambled around him, whispering frantically. Then Judge Donovan spoke again. Calm. Slow. Dangerous. Mr. Blackwell, he said, federal investigators recovered evidence at approximately 4 o'clock this morning indicating multiple attempts to conceal assets tied directly to Blackwell Capital. Ethan's confidence finally cracked. Claire saw it happen in real time. The billionaire who once controlled every room he entered suddenly looked like a man realizing the walls were closing around him. And then the courtroom doors opened again. 2 federal agents stepped inside carrying another sealed evidence box. The sealed evidence box landed on the prosecution table with a heavy sound that instantly tightened the tension inside courtroom 12B. Every reporter leaned forward at once. Camera shutters clicked rapidly like distant rainfall against glass. Ethan Blackwell stared at the box as though it contained a live grenade. One federal agent quietly handed a folder to Olivia Carter while the other remained standing near the courtroom doors with his hands clasped behind his back. Judge Raymond Donovan adjusted his glasses slightly. Calm. Unmoved. Proceed, he said. Olivia opened the folder carefully, scanning the first page before lifting her eyes toward the courtroom screens. Federal investigators recovered deleted communications from Blackwell Capital servers at 4:12 this morning, she announced. Ethan's attorney immediately rose again. Your Honor, we have not had time to review this material. You will, Judge Donovan replied evenly. Sit down. Ethan clenched his jaw hard enough to visibly tense the muscles near his temples. Across the courtroom, Vanessa Hale looked smaller now somehow. Less glamorous. Less untouchable. Fear had stripped away the confidence she wore like expensive perfume. Olivia pressed a button on the remote in her hand. A string of text messages appeared on the giant courtroom monitor. Ethan's name sat at the top beside timestamps from 3 nights earlier. The room fell silent enough to hear the soft hum of the ceiling lights. She will sign eventually. Another message appeared beneath it. If Claire refuses, stress her harder. The baby changes everything once it is born. Claire lowered her eyes immediately. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her coat, while the baby shifted gently beneath the fabric. Beep, beep. The tiny monitor clipped beneath her sleeve continued its steady rhythm. Ethan stood abruptly. Those messages are taken out of context. Olivia did not even look toward him. Another message appeared. I cannot lose half the company because she suddenly wants to play victim. A reporter near the back whispered, Oh my God. The courtroom exploded into murmurs until the bailiff shouted for silence. Vanessa slowly turned toward Ethan again, disbelief washing across her face all over again like she still could not understand how quickly he was abandoning her. You told me this was about protecting the company, she whispered shakily. Ethan snapped back instantly. Because it was. No, Vanessa said quietly. It was about money. Claire closed her eyes briefly as another memory hit her unexpectedly. Ethan sitting beside her years ago in their first tiny apartment above a bakery on Clark Street. The smell of cinnamon drifting through cracked windows while they ate takeout on the floor because they could not afford furniture yet. He used to hold her hand while talking about their future. He used to say success meant building a family together. Somewhere along the way, the hunger for money replaced everything human inside him. Judge Donovan looked toward the federal agents. Was additional evidence recovered? One of the agents stepped forward. Yes, Your Honor. He opened the evidence box carefully and removed several folders along with a silver laptop sealed inside a transparent bag. Forensic accounting teams uncovered multiple offshore accounts connected to shell companies controlled by Blackwell Capital executives. Ethan's attorney quickly interjected. My client has not been convicted of any financial crime. Not yet, Olivia replied coldly. Another ripple moved through the courtroom. Then the federal agent delivered the sentence that changed everything. We also recovered an unsigned draft agreement transferring future controlling shares of Blackwell Capital away from the unborn child of Claire Donovan. Claire inhaled sharply. Ethan's expression hardened immediately. That document was never executed. But it was prepared, Judge Donovan answered. Ethan remained silent. Olivia walked slowly toward the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, she said carefully. This demonstrates clear intent to manipulate inheritance protections before the child's birth. Claire looked down at her stomach again as emotion tightened painfully in her chest. It was never only about her. It was about the baby too. The realization settled over the courtroom like cold smoke. Vanessa suddenly stood from her chair. I want immunity. The words came out so suddenly several reporters nearly dropped their phones. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Vanessa. No. She fired back emotionally. I am not going down alone. Judge Donovan watched her carefully. Miss Hale, are you requesting cooperation with federal prosecutors? She nodded rapidly now, panic taking full control. I have recordings, she admitted. Ethan's entire face changed. Not anger. Fear. Pure fear. Vanessa reached shakily into her designer handbag and pulled out a small white flash drive. He recorded everything, she whispered. Business calls. Meetings. Conversations. Olivia stepped forward slowly and accepted the drive from her hand. Ethan took one step forward immediately. That device is protected corporate property. Sit down, Mr. Blackwell. Judge Donovan warned sharply. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Ethan actually obeyed without arguing. Claire watched him carefully. The powerful billionaire everyone feared now looked trapped. Smaller somehow. Human. Outside the courthouse, thunder rolled across downtown Chicago while rain streaked against the tall windows. The storm outside seemed perfectly timed. Olivia handed the flash drive to the federal agents, who immediately connected it to the courtroom system. A loading screen appeared on the monitors. Then audio crackled softly through the speakers. Ethan's voice filled the courtroom once more. Calm, confident, cold. Once the baby is born, everything gets complicated. Claire felt her heartbeat slow as dread settled heavily in her stomach. Because suddenly she realized this hearing was no longer about a hospital scandal. It was about discovering just how far Ethan Blackwell had been willing to go. The recording crackled softly through the courtroom speakers while rain hammered harder against the tall windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Every person inside courtroom 12B sat perfectly still. Even the reporters stopped typing. Ethan Blackwell's voice echoed clearly through the silence. Once the baby is born, everything gets complicated. A second voice followed immediately after. Vanessa Hale. Nervous. Lower. Then what do you want me to do? Claire felt cold spread through her chest despite the warmth of the courtroom. Her fingers tightened slowly around the edge of her chair, while the monitor beneath her coat continued its calm rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Ethan answered casually on the recording, almost amused. I just need pressure on Claire before the delivery. Several people in the courtroom exchanged stunned looks. Olivia Carter remained perfectly composed, but Claire noticed even she inhaled more carefully now. Then the recording continued. She trusts hospitals, Ethan said. She feels safe there. Vanessa's voice lowered further. And if she still refuses? A pause followed. 3 long seconds of static filled the courtroom speakers before Ethan finally answered. Then we make her understand what losing everything feels like. Claire stopped breathing for a moment. Across the courtroom, Ethan suddenly rose from his chair. That recording is incomplete. His voice carried frustration now instead of confidence. You do not have context. Judge Raymond Donovan stared down at him coldly. Sit down, Mr. Blackwell. Ethan hesitated. The courtroom waited. Then slowly, reluctantly, he obeyed. Claire watched him carefully while memories surfaced one after another against her will. Ethan standing in their kitchen 6 years earlier learning she was pregnant for the first time before they lost the baby at 11 weeks. Ethan crying with her that night. Ethan promising they would build a family together someday. The man in those memories no longer matched the one sitting across the courtroom now. This version of Ethan looked hollow, like greed had slowly eaten every decent part of him alive. Olivia pressed another button on the remote. A new file opened on the courtroom screens. Security footage from St. Vincent Medical Center. The timestamp blinked in the corner. 48 hours earlier. Claire instantly recognized the hallway outside the maternity ward. Nurses walked calmly through the frame. Visitors passed carrying flowers and balloons. Then Vanessa appeared. Olivia paused the video. This footage was recovered directly from hospital servers, she explained. Unedited. Ethan's attorney stood again immediately. Your Honor, this is becoming a media spectacle. Judge Donovan did not even look toward him. Sit down. Olivia resumed the video. Vanessa approached Claire near the nurse's station. At first there was no audio, only movement. Claire remembered the conversation perfectly anyway. Vanessa smiling too sweetly, pretending she wanted peace, pretending she wanted to talk privately. Then the footage shifted. Vanessa's expression hardened. Claire took one step backward. Ethan appeared, entering the frame seconds later. And then the moment everyone had already seen online unfolded again from a wider camera angle. Claire losing balance near the wall. Nurses rushing forward. Ethan standing there without moving. The video stopped abruptly before the collapse. Silence swallowed the courtroom again. One reporter quietly whispered, "Unbelievable." Vanessa lowered her head into her hands. Mascara streaked slightly beneath her eyes now. The perfect image she spent years building was gone. Olivia stepped toward the jury rail slowly. "What matters here is not only what happened in that hallway," she said carefully. "It is why it happened." Claire felt the baby move gently beneath her coat, as if sensing her stress again. She rested one hand against her stomach instinctively. Judge Donovan noticed the movement immediately. For just 1 second, emotion flickered across his face. Not as a judge, as a father, but it disappeared quickly beneath discipline. One of the federal agents approached the bench carrying another folder. "Additional financial records were recovered 30 minutes ago," he announced. Ethan's eyes narrowed instantly. "From where?" The agent answered calmly. "A storage facility registered under Vanessa Hale's name." Vanessa looked up sharply. "What?" Inside were documents connected to offshore transfers totaling $78 million. The courtroom erupted into shocked murmurs again. Vanessa stared toward Ethan with open panic now. "You said those accounts were legal." Ethan's patience finally snapped. "Would you stop talking?" His voice echoed so loudly several people near the back flinched. Claire stared at him in silence. This was the real Ethan. Not the polished billionaire from magazine covers. Not the charming investor from charity galas. Just a frightened man losing control. Olivia slowly opened the newly delivered folder. "There is more," she said quietly. She removed a single printed page and handed copies toward the bench. Judge Donovan scanned the document once, then again slower. His expression darkened immediately. "Mr. Blackwell," he said carefully, "did you recently attempt to modify your unborn child's trust protections?" Ethan's silence answered before his mouth ever moved. Claire felt her stomach tighten painfully. Olivia looked directly toward Ethan now. 3 days before the hospital incident, Mr. Blackwell filed preliminary paperwork requesting sole executive control over all inheritance assets connected to the child until the age of 21. Claire's eyes widened. 21 years. Ethan had planned to control everything for decades. Judge Donovan placed the document down slowly. The room had become so quiet the sound of rain against the courthouse windows almost seemed deafening. Then the judge spoke words that made Ethan visibly pale. "Federal prosecutors may proceed with immediate criminal review." And for the first time since building his empire, Ethan Blackwell looked like a man who finally understood he might actually lose everything. Snow began falling lightly over downtown Chicago by late afternoon, dusting the courthouse steps in pale white, while crowds of reporters remained packed behind police barricades waiting for the next update in the Blackwell scandal. Inside courtroom 12B, the atmosphere had completely changed. Earlier that morning, Ethan Blackwell entered the room like a billionaire accustomed to controlling every conversation. Now he sat rigid beside his attorneys while federal agents quietly moved in and out of side doors carrying boxes of evidence from Blackwell Capital headquarters. The collapse was no longer theoretical. It was happening in real time. Claire Donovan sat silently near the front beside Olivia Carter, one hand resting beneath the curve of her stomach while exhaustion settled visibly into her face. She had not slept more than 2 hours since the hospital incident. Every muscle in her body felt heavy. But despite the exhaustion, there was something strangely calm about her now. The fear was slowly leaving. The truth was finally louder than Ethan's money. Judge Raymond Donovan reviewed several documents beneath the glow of the courtroom lights while the soft scratching of reporters typing filled the silence. Then one of the federal prosecutors stood. "Your Honor," he began carefully, "the United States Attorney's Office is requesting immediate temporary seizure authority over multiple Blackwell Capital financial accounts pending criminal investigation." Ethan's attorney rose instantly. "Absolutely not." This is an outrageous overreach based entirely on speculation and public pressure. Public pressure did not create offshore fraud. The prosecutor replied coldly. Ethan suddenly leaned forward himself. You have no proof I committed a crime. The prosecutor calmly slid another document across the table. Actually, we do. Ethan's expression tightened immediately. Olivia glanced toward Claire briefly before the document appeared on the courtroom screens overhead. It was an internal company memorandum signed electronically 6 months earlier. Claire recognized the date instantly. It was the same week Ethan told her Blackwell Capital was struggling financially. The same week he convinced her to refinance the lake house in her name to protect the company. Her stomach turned cold as she read the numbers now displayed before the entire courtroom. Secret transfers, hidden assets, luxury property purchases routed through shell corporations. $78 million moved quietly beyond federal oversight. Claire blinked slowly. The entire time Ethan claimed they needed sacrifices to protect the business, he had been quietly protecting himself instead. Vanessa Hale looked physically ill now. Her hands trembled slightly against the defense table. You told me the accounts were temporary, she whispered toward Ethan. Ethan did not answer. He simply kept staring ahead at the courtroom monitor like he could somehow will the evidence to disappear. Judge Donovan finally looked up from the bench. Mr. Blackwell, did you knowingly conceal assets while preparing divorce proceedings against Mrs. Donovan? Ethan inhaled carefully before answering. I followed legal advice regarding corporate restructuring. Even now, he spoke like a man trying to negotiate a business merger instead of defend his collapsing life. The judge's expression hardened slightly. That was not my question. Ethan hesitated. Tiny beads of sweat appeared near his hairline despite the cold courtroom air. Across the room, Claire suddenly remembered something strange from months earlier. Ethan locking his office door more often, taking late-night phone calls on the balcony, snapping at her anytime she asked simple financial questions. At the time, she blamed stress. She blamed herself. Women in love often explain away the very things that should terrify them. Olivia rose slowly from her chair. Your Honor, there is one additional matter we believe directly impacts the safety and financial future of Mrs. Donovan and her unborn child. Claire looked toward her immediately. Olivia opened another folder and removed a hospital intake form from St. Vincent Medical Center. This document was signed electronically by Mr. Blackwell 2 days before the incident. Ethan's attorney frowned. What document? Olivia held it up clearly. Emergency medical authorization paperwork. Claire's heartbeat quickened instantly. She had never seen the form before. Olivia continued carefully. Under secondary instructions, Mr. Blackwell requested temporary executive authority over all trust assets related to the child in the event Mrs. Donovan became medically incapacitated during delivery. Silence spread across the courtroom again. Heavy, suffocating. Claire stared toward Ethan with open disbelief. You planned this, she whispered softly. Ethan finally looked at her directly for the first time all day. But instead of guilt, Claire saw frustration. Cold frustration. Claire, listen to me. No, she answered quietly. You listen. Her voice trembled slightly, but never broke. I stood beside you when nobody believed in you. I worked beside you before Blackwell Capital had a real office. I defended you when people called you ruthless. I loved you when you had nothing. Ethan swallowed hard. Reporters typed furiously now. Claire pressed one shaking hand protectively over her stomach. And somehow, she continued softly, money still was not enough for you. Ethan looked away first. That small movement shattered something invisible inside the courtroom. Because everyone saw it happen. The billionaire who once controlled every room could no longer even hold eye contact with the woman he betrayed. Then suddenly one of the federal agents stepped quickly toward the prosecution table, holding a cell phone. Sir, he said urgently to the prosecutor, you need to see this. The prosecutor read the screen once. His expression changed instantly. He turned toward Judge Donovan. Your Honor, federal investigators just confirmed that approximately $4 million were transferred from a Blackwell Capital emergency account less than 1 hour ago. Ethan's head snapped upward immediately. What? The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. The transfer originated from a device registered under your personal executive credentials. The entire courtroom froze. Ethan stared ahead in complete silence. And for the first time since this nightmare began, even his own attorneys slowly moved their chairs farther away from him. The temperature inside courtroom 12B seemed to drop 10 degrees after the prosecutor revealed the $4 million transfer. Nobody moved. Nobody even whispered. Ethan Blackwell sat completely still at the defense table while every camera in the room pointed directly at him. His attorneys exchanged nervous looks with each other before one slowly leaned closer. "Ethan," he whispered urgently, "tell me you did not move money during an active federal hearing." Ethan did not answer immediately. His jaw tightened hard enough to visibly shake near his temple while snow continued drifting past the courthouse windows outside. Claire Donovan watched him carefully from across the room. For years she believed Ethan always had an answer for everything. Every crisis, every negotiation, every mistake. But now she was watching something she had never seen before. Silence. Real fear had finally reached him. The federal prosecutor stepped toward the center of the courtroom, holding the phone containing the transfer confirmation. The account receiving the funds belongs to a holding corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, he explained calmly. Authorization codes matched directly to Mr. Blackwell's executive credentials. Ethan suddenly stood. "I did not authorize any transfer." His voice came out sharper now. Desperate. "Someone is setting me up." Olivia Carter crossed her arms slowly. That explanation would be more believable if this was the first hidden account investigators found. A few reporters near the back exchanged glances immediately. Ethan turned toward his attorneys angrily. "Do something." But even his legal team looked uncertain now. One attorney quietly rubbed his forehead, while another stared down at the evidence table, avoiding eye contact completely. Judge Raymond Donovan folded his hands together. "Mr. Blackwell, were you aware your financial systems remained under federal monitoring after this morning's emergency order?" Ethan froze. Tiny details suddenly clicked together behind his eyes. The investigation, the seized servers, the forensic accountants, the frozen accounts. Claire watched realization slowly spread across his face. Whoever attempted the transfer either ignored the federal order or believed they still had time to escape before the government closed in completely. Vanessa Hale suddenly lifted her head from the defense table. "I did not move any money," she blurted out quickly. "I want that on record." Ethan looked toward her with open disbelief. "Seriously? You blamed everything on me first. Because you keep talking." Vanessa stood abruptly now, emotion cracking through her voice. "You promised none of this would touch me." The courtroom stirred again. Claire closed her eyes briefly as another memory surfaced unexpectedly. Ethan standing beside Vanessa at charity galas the past 6 months. The way his hand rested too comfortably against Vanessa's back. The private smiles they shared when they thought nobody noticed. Claire used to blame herself for feeling insecure. Pregnancy hormones. Stress. Exhaustion. That was what Ethan always called it whenever she questioned him. But deep down, her instincts knew the truth long before her heart accepted it. Olivia stepped closer to the prosecution table. "Your Honor, federal agents also recovered deleted text messages connected to the offshore transfer attempt." Ethan's attorney immediately interrupted again. "We object to the continued public release of unverified communications." Judge Donovan's expression remained cold. "Overruled." Another screen illuminated above the courtroom. Claire looked up slowly while messages appeared one after another. "Unknown number. Funds need to clear before midnight." "Ethan, handle it quietly." "Unknown number. What about the hearing?" "Ethan, by tomorrow nothing will matter anyway." The entire room fell silent again. Even Ethan's own attorneys looked stunned now. One reporter whispered softly, "He thought he could outrun this." Claire stared at the screen while a strange sadness settled over her instead of anger. 7 years together. 7 years building a life around a man who apparently spent the last year planning how to protect his fortune from his own family. The baby shifted beneath her coat gently. Beep, beep, beep. The tiny heartbeat monitor remained steady despite the tension swallowing the room. Judge Donovan glanced briefly toward Claire before speaking again. "Mr. Blackwell, federal prosecutors are now requesting immediate criminal detention pending further investigation into financial obstruction and conspiracy." Ethan's head snapped upward instantly. "Detention?" His voice cracked slightly for the first time all day. "You cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious," the judge replied calmly. Ethan laughed once under his breath, but there was no confidence left in the sound anymore. Only panic trying to disguise itself as arrogance. "This is insane," he muttered. "I built thousands of jobs in this city. And none of those jobs place you above federal law," Judge Donovan answered. One of the federal agents quietly stepped closer now. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but the movement alone shifted the entire atmosphere inside the courtroom. Claire noticed Ethan's breathing change instantly. Faster now, less controlled. Across the room, Vanessa slowly sat back down in her chair, suddenly realizing she was no longer sitting beside a powerful billionaire. She was sitting beside a man the government was preparing to arrest. Olivia opened another folder carefully. "There is one final matter, Your Honor." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, like he physically could not tolerate hearing another surprise. Olivia continued calmly. "St. Vincent Medical Center completed additional medical evaluations on Mrs. Donovan this afternoon." Claire looked toward her immediately. Stress complications from the hospital incident significantly increased the risk of premature delivery. The words landed heavily inside the courtroom. For the first time all day, Ethan's expression changed into something almost human again. He looked toward Claire's stomach instinctively, toward the child, toward the consequences finally becoming real. Claire met his eyes silently. She no longer saw power when she looked at him, only weakness hiding inside expensive suits and empty promises. Then suddenly the courtroom doors swung open again. Another federal officer stepped inside, carrying a thin sealed envelope marked urgent. He walked directly toward Judge Donovan and whispered something quietly into his ear. The judge's face hardened immediately. Slowly, he opened the envelope and read the first page. Then he looked directly at Ethan Blackwell and said 7 words that drained every remaining color from Ethan's face. "Federal warrants have now been officially approved." The sound of camera shutters outside the courthouse grew louder the moment Judge Raymond Donovan announced the federal warrants. Even through the thick courtroom walls, the noise carried like distant thunder rolling through downtown Chicago. Inside courtroom 12B, nobody spoke for several seconds. Ethan Blackwell remained frozen in his chair, staring at the judge as if he had misheard him completely. "No," Ethan said finally, his voice quieter now, less certain. "This is not happening." Judge Donovan slowly removed his glasses and placed them carefully on the bench in front of him. Federal agents now have authorization to detain individuals connected to obstruction of justice, unlawful asset concealment, and conspiracy related to ongoing financial crimes investigations. Claire Donovan felt the baby move beneath her coat again, while the tiny heartbeat monitor continued its calm rhythm against the silence. Beep, beep, beep. Steady. Alive. For the first time since entering the courtroom that morning, she realized she was no longer afraid of Ethan. Across the room, his attorneys immediately stood, speaking rapidly over one another. "Your Honor, we request immediate recess. My client has cooperated fully. This hearing has escalated beyond procedural fairness." But Judge Donovan's expression never changed. "Denied." One of the federal agents stepped forward quietly, not aggressively, calmly, professionally. That somehow made the moment feel even heavier. Ethan looked toward the agent approaching him and suddenly laughed once under his breath. The sound felt hollow. "You cannot seriously believe I am some criminal mastermind," he muttered. The prosecutor answered before anyone else could. "Mr. Blackwell, innocent people usually do not move millions of dollars during active federal hearings." Ethan's jaw tightened again. Vanessa Hale slowly lowered her face into trembling hands beside him. Her perfect makeup was fading now beneath exhaustion and panic. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman from magazine photos standing beside Ethan at charity galas. Money disappeared fast when fear arrived. Claire watched both of them silently, while another painful memory surfaced unexpectedly. 3 months earlier, Ethan promised they would take one last vacation together before the baby arrived. Aspen, snow-covered mountains, quiet fireplaces, time to reconnect. Instead, he spent the entire trip taking private calls outside their suite, while Claire sat alone watching snow fall through giant hotel windows. She remembered blaming herself for feeling lonely back then. Now she understood something terrible. Ethan had already emotionally left the marriage long before the hospital incident ever happened. Olivia Carter stepped toward Claire quietly and handed her a small paper cup of water. "You okay?" she whispered softly. Claire nodded once. "I think so." But deep down she knew something inside her had permanently changed today. The woman who once begged Ethan to love her enough to stay was gone now. Judge Donovan reviewed the federal warrant briefly before signing the final authorization page with a single calm motion. The scratching sound of his pen against paper echoed strangely loud through the courtroom. Ethan watched every movement carefully, like a man watching the door close on his old life forever. "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Donovan said evenly, "you will surrender all personal electronic devices immediately." Ethan stood slowly this time. No confidence remained in his posture anymore. The billionaire who once dominated financial magazines now looked exhausted beneath the courtroom lights. He removed his phone from his jacket pocket and placed it carefully onto the defense table. Then another phone. Then a tablet. Every item landed with a soft sound that somehow felt symbolic. Layers of power disappearing one piece at a time. Vanessa suddenly looked toward the federal agents nervously. "Am I being arrested too?" One of the agents answered carefully. "At this time you are considered a cooperating witness, pending prosecutorial review." Ethan turned sharply toward her. "Of course you are." Vanessa's eyes flashed instantly. "Do not act surprised. You would have sacrificed me without hesitation." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but stopped himself. Because she was right. Everyone in the courtroom knew she was right. Outside, news helicopters circled above the courthouse while television anchors delivered live updates to millions of viewers across the country. The scandal had already become national news. Analysts debated Blackwell Capital's collapse in real time. Investors fled. Stock prices crashed. One business network displayed a red banner reading, "Blackwell Empire in free fall." Claire caught the headline briefly on a reporter's phone screen near the back row. Empire. The word almost made her sad. Ethan once dreamed of building something meaningful. Somewhere along the way, he stopped building a future and started building a fortress around his ego instead. One of the federal agents approached Ethan carefully. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Ethan looked toward Claire suddenly. Really looked at her. Not as an obstacle. Not as a legal problem. As the woman he once loved. For one tiny second, Claire saw regret flicker across his face. Real regret. "Claire," he said quietly, "I never wanted things to end like this." Claire stared at him for several long seconds. The entire courtroom seemed to disappear around them. No reporters. No cameras. No federal agents. Just two people standing in the ruins of a marriage neither of them recognized anymore. Then Claire answered softly. "That is the problem, Ethan." Her hand rested gently against her stomach. "You stopped caring how anything ended as long as you kept winning." Ethan lowered his eyes first. Again, the federal agents moved beside him calmly, while reporters practically pressed forward in their seats, waiting for the moment the billionaire would finally walk out under federal custody. But before Ethan could take a single step, Claire suddenly inhaled sharply. Her hand tightened against the edge of the table. Olivia noticed immediately. "Claire." Another sharp pain crossed through her stomach. Stronger this time. The heartbeat monitor accelerated instantly. Beep, beep, beep. Faster now. Several nurses stationed near the courtroom entrance turned at once. Claire closed her eyes briefly as another contraction rolled through her body. And suddenly the entire courtroom forgot about Ethan Blackwell completely. The sharp sound of the heartbeat monitor cut through courtroom 12B like an alarm nobody could ignore. Beep, beep, beep. Faster now. Claire Donovan gripped the edge of the defense table as another contraction tightened across her stomach hard enough to steal the air from her lungs. Olivia Carter immediately moved beside her. "Claire, look at me," she said calmly. "Breathe slowly." But the courtroom was already shifting into chaos. Reporters stood from their seats. Federal agents stepped aside instantly. Nurses stationed near the entrance rushed forward carrying emergency medical bags while the bailiff shouted for everyone to clear space. Ethan Blackwell remained frozen near the center aisle between two federal agents, staring at Claire in complete shock. For a moment he forgot about the warrants, forgot about the cameras, forgot about himself entirely. "Claire," he said quietly, taking one instinctive step toward her. Olivia immediately blocked him with a sharp look. "Do not come any closer." Claire closed her eyes briefly as another wave of pain rolled through her body. The stress, the courtroom, the hours without rest. Everything had finally caught up to her at once. Judge Raymond Donovan stepped down from the bench faster than anyone expected from a man his age. The entire courtroom watched silently as the powerful federal judge knelt beside his daughter without caring who was watching. "Sweetheart," he said softly. Stay with me. Claire opened her eyes slowly. Fear flickered there for the first time all day. Not fear of Ethan anymore. Fear for the baby. One of the nurses quickly checked the portable monitor attached beneath Claire's coat. Her expression tightened immediately. Her blood pressure is climbing, she warned. We need transport now. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy exploded. The second ambulance crews appeared at the front entrance. News alerts flashed across television screens nationwide within minutes. Pregnant wife suffers medical emergency during Blackwell hearing. Helicopters circled overhead while crowds pressed against barricades trying to glimpse what was happening inside. Ethan watched the nurses carefully help Claire onto a transport stretcher. Her pale hair spilled across the white pillow while snowlight filtered through the courthouse windows behind her. She looked exhausted, fragile, human. And suddenly Ethan understood something horrifying. For months he convinced himself Claire would always survive whatever he did to her emotionally. She always forgave him, always endured. But now, watching medical staff rush her toward the courthouse exit, he realized how close he had come to losing everything in a way money could never repair. Claire weakly turned her head as the stretcher rolled past him. Their eyes met for one brief second. Ethan opened his mouth like he wanted to say something meaningful. An apology maybe. But no words came out. Because deep down, even he knew apologies arrived too late sometimes. The elevator doors closed behind Claire, and the medical team disappeared downstairs toward the waiting ambulance. Silence settled heavily over the courtroom afterward. The kind of silence left behind after a storm tears through everything. Judge Donovan slowly stood again near the center aisle, his expression colder now than anyone had seen all day. One of the federal agents approached carefully. Your Honor. Judge Donovan raised one hand slightly. Proceed. Ethan looked stunned. You are continuing this? A woman and unborn child were placed under enough stress to trigger a medical emergency. The judge answered evenly. Yes, Mr. Blackwell. We are continuing. Vanessa Hale stared down at the floor without speaking. Mascara stains marked the edges of her cheeks now. She looked broken beneath the courtroom lights. One of the prosecutors stepped forward carrying another updated report. Blackwell Capital stock has now dropped 58% since markets opened this morning, he announced quietly. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. 58%. Hundreds of millions gone in a single day. Board members were already resigning publicly. Investors were filing emergency withdrawal requests. News analysts compared the collapse to some of the largest financial scandals in recent American history. But strangely, Ethan barely reacted anymore. Because none of it felt as terrifying as watching Claire disappear behind those elevator doors. Olivia returned to the courtroom 20 minutes later, snow melting across the shoulders of her dark coat. Everyone looked toward her immediately. Ethan stepped forward before anyone else could speak. Is she okay? Olivia studied him silently for a long moment before answering. Doctors stabilized her for now. Ethan exhaled shakily. Relief flashed visibly across his face. But Olivia was not finished. They are monitoring the baby closely overnight. The tiny amount of relief vanished instantly again. Olivia walked toward the prosecution table and placed several hospital documents beside Judge Donovan. Then she turned toward Ethan one final time. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? She asked quietly. Ethan did not answer. Olivia's eyes hardened slightly. Claire spent years defending you to everyone who warned her. Ethan lowered his gaze toward the polished courtroom floor. Outside, snow continued falling across Chicago while flashing police lights reflected against the courthouse windows. One of the federal agents stepped beside Ethan again. Mr. Blackwell, he said calmly, it is time. This time Ethan did not resist. He slowly extended his hands forward while reporters near the back practically climbed over each other for a better view. The billionaire who once arrived at galas in chauffeured black cars now stood beneath harsh courtroom lights surrounded by federal agents and cameras. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed softly through the room. Vanessa looked away immediately. Ethan did not. He stared toward the courtroom doors Claire had disappeared through earlier, as though part of him was still trying to follow her. But the doors remained closed. And for the first time in his entire life, Ethan Blackwell had finally run out of ways to buy control back. 3 weeks later, the snow had melted from downtown Chicago, leaving the city washed in cold silver rain and pale winter sunlight. The Blackwell scandal still dominated national headlines. Business networks replayed courtroom footage daily. Financial analysts called the collapse of Blackwell Capital one of the fastest corporate implosions in recent American history. Former board members testified before federal investigators. Offshore accounts were frozen. Luxury properties were seized. Vanessa Hale disappeared completely from public view after agreeing to cooperate with prosecutors. But inside room 814 at St. Vincent Medical Center, none of that mattered anymore. The room smelled faintly of baby powder and hospital disinfectant, while soft morning light spilled through the curtains across polished floors. Claire Donovan sat quietly in a chair beside the window wearing a pale gray sweater, her long blonde hair tied loosely back over one shoulder. In her arms rested a sleeping newborn wrapped carefully in a white hospital blanket with tiny blue stripes along the edges. The baby's small fingers curled gently against Claire's chest. Beep, beep. The monitors nearby sounded soft now. Peaceful. No panic. No courtroom tension. Just steady life filling the quiet room. Claire looked down at her daughter and smiled through exhausted eyes. "You really scared me," she whispered softly. The baby shifted slightly before settling again against her heartbeat. Judge Raymond Donovan stood nearby holding 2 cups of coffee while watching his daughter carefully. The hard expression he carried inside courtrooms had disappeared completely these past few weeks. Around Claire, he became something else entirely. Protective, gentle, human. "Doctors say both of you are healthy enough to go home tomorrow," he said quietly. Claire nodded slowly. Home. The word still felt strange. The penthouse overlooking Lakeshore Drive was gone now. Federal asset freezes covered nearly everything connected to Ethan Blackwell. But strangely, Claire did not miss any of it. Not the marble counters. Not the private drivers. Not the gala invitations. Pain had stripped her life down to what actually mattered. Safety. Peace. Her daughter breathing quietly in her arms. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Olivia Carter stepped into the room carrying a folded newspaper beneath her arm. "I figured you had not seen today's headlines yet," she said carefully. Claire smiled faintly. "Do I want to?" Olivia handed her the paper gently. Across the front page sat a large photograph of Ethan Blackwell entering federal court, wearing a dark overcoat beside 2 attorneys. The headline beneath it read, "Former Blackwell CEO denied bail, AS investigation expands." Claire stared at the image silently. Ethan looked older somehow. Smaller. The confidence that once made entire rooms revolve around him had vanished completely beneath the flashing cameras and federal scrutiny. Olivia sat carefully near the window. "Federal prosecutors added conspiracy charges yesterday," she explained quietly. "The financial damage is estimated above $200 million now." Claire looked back down at her daughter instead of the newspaper. "I used to think losing him would destroy me," she admitted softly. Judge Donovan remained silent nearby, allowing his daughter space to speak. Claire brushed one finger gently across the baby's tiny hand. "But honestly," she whispered, "I think I lost him long before the courtroom ever happened." Rain tapped softly against the hospital windows while downtown traffic moved far below like another world entirely. Olivia carefully glanced toward the sleeping baby. "Have you chosen a name yet?" Claire smiled again. A real smile this time. Small, warm, healing, hope, she answered quietly. "Her name is Hope Donovan." Judge Donovan lowered his eyes briefly at the sound of the name. Emotion flickered across his face before he cleared his throat softly and looked back toward the window. Outside, winter clouds slowly parted enough for sunlight to break through the skyline. Claire adjusted the blanket around Hope carefully while memories drifted through her mind one last time. Ethan laughing coldly in the hospital hallway. The courtroom lights. The headlines. The handcuffs. The betrayal. All of it felt strangely distant now, like surviving a storm that almost drowned her. But storms passed eventually. That was the thing nobody told you when your life was falling apart. Pain felt permanent while you were inside it. Until one morning you opened your eyes and realized you survived. Another soft knock sounded at the door. One of the nurses stepped inside, smiling gently. "Miss Donovan," she said warmly, "there is someone downstairs asking if they can send flowers up." Claire frowned slightly. "Who?" The nurse glanced down at the small card attached to the bouquet. "It only says this," she answered quietly. "Some mistakes cost more than money." Claire stared silently for several long seconds before shaking her head once. "Please send them back." The nurse nodded respectfully and left the room again. Olivia studied Claire carefully afterward. No second chances. Claire looked down at Hope sleeping peacefully against her chest, then toward the sunlight slowly filling the hospital room. Some people confuse love with permission, she said softly. I'm not doing that anymore. No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. The monitors continued their gentle rhythm beside the bed while morning light warmed the room little by little. Claire leaned back quietly in the chair holding her daughter close, listening to the tiny steady breaths against her chest. Weeks earlier, this same hospital became the place where her marriage finally collapsed in front of the entire world. But now, somehow, it had become the place where her real life finally began.